The first silence wasn't loud. It was a small thing, the kind that slips between two people at dinner and sits in the empty chair like it paid rent. I remember the fork touching the plate, the soft clink, and how the sound seemed to keep going after the metal had already settled, like an echo that didn't know when to stop. She smiled without showing teeth, said she was tired, said work had been a lot. The word hung there, weightless but somehow heavy. The apartment hummed with the refrigerator's breath and the distant hiss of tires on wet pavement. Rain tapping a soft drum on the glass. The room's light was gray, like it was thinking of leaving before we did. We used to talk about nothing and everything. Now nothing was the everything. I asked if the jasmine had bloomed on the balcony. She said she hadn't looked. I said I could check. I didn't stand up. She didn't look at me when she laughed. We ate quietly, the scent of garlic and olive oil rising and then thinning like us. The candles we forgot to light stood like little sentries, guarding a ritual we were too tired to honor. The chair across from me felt farther away than it should have. An empty centimeter can be a mile. Nights like that became the new ordinary. A week later, she started staying late at work more often. I told myself it was a season, a rush project, a bad client. The city was downsizing people, but not their need for deliverables. She came home with the smell of rain and an unfamiliar cologne clinging to her coat, just a trace, like a story told in a whisper. I inhaled, felt the small sting in my chest, and set 2 cups under the espresso machine anyway. She rinsed her hands longer than usual. I stared at the water running over skin I knew too well, and suddenly not at all. I started counting small things. Messages delayed by minutes, then hours. The way she turned her phone face down, an innocent habit explained easily, and yet, the way laughter happened in another room, the way she laughed with me felt edited. I found myself walking slower in our hallway at night, listening for sound behind the bathroom door, the soft tact of her thumb across glass, the microsecond between the phone lighting up and going dark. The bed felt wide as an ocean. I slept on. The discovery, when it came, wasn't cinematic. No shouting, no glass shattered. It was Sunday morning, with pale light pooling on the floor and the smell of decent coffee pretending to be comfort. She was still in bed, tangled in the sheets like she'd tried to anchor herself to a place she was already leaving. Her phone buzzed on the dresser, a small insect of a sound. I didn't mean to look. I meant to be someone who didn't look. But the screen woke and there it was, a preview, a name that wasn't mine, a sentence that didn't belong to us. Last night made me feel like the only man in the room. That's what an alpha does. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. The words had already entered me, cut clean and cold. Alpha. The word strutted through our quiet apartment, left muddy footprints on everything we'd made. I walked to the window and watched the rain stitch thin silver lines between the sky and the street. I heard her turn in bed. She said my name like a question. I said her name like a memory. The coffee steamed. The room smelled like mornings when we were still us. I wanted to go back inside them and lock the door. When I finally faced her, I didn't accuse her with a list. I asked a single question, and even that felt too loud. Are you in love with someone else? Her eyes were wet before her throat found words. She said, I don't know. The truth arrived in that small mess of syllables. The not knowing that means knowing too well. She started to explain, but explanations are scaffolding. Underneath, there's always the same physics. Something falls because the weight shifted long before it snapped. She said his name, Evan, in a voice that sounded like she didn't recognize it, or herself, or me. Said he made her feel seen, said he made her feel alive, said words that were once ours. I listened and felt every nerve hold its breath. She didn't confess a moment so much as a season. Dinners that ended earlier in her calendar than in mine. Mornings that began elsewhere. The afternoons braid-tied with messages and inside jokes and the kind of intimacy that rots walls you think are load-bearing. I asked how long. She said months. I asked if it was over. She looked away. In the silence, the answer put its coat on. In the quiet, I could hear the cologne again, something cedar and sharp, and the rain would not stop. I wanted to believe in a hard line we could draw and stand behind, but lines blur when you're weeping. She reached for my hand. I flinched, not because I hated her touch, but because I knew it too well. And now it knew someone. We didn't break, not that morning. We bent until the room laned with us. I told her she could stay the night. She said she'd sleep on the couch. I didn't argue. Her body moved through the apartment like she was afraid of startling a wild animal, me, or the version of herself that had done this. At dusk, the city's glow found its way onto our walls, making soft rectangles, as if the lights were trying to pin us to the moment. I stood in the kitchen, held the counter, and breathed, quietly, carefully, like stepping across thin ice. At 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of the balcony door sliding open, bare feet on cold concrete. I didn't get up. The jasmine had finally bloomed, small white stars in the night air. For a second, the scent made me forget. Then it made me remember more. I lay there listening to the rain ease and the traffic hush and the world do what it always does, keep moving. Somewhere in the darkness, a man who called himself an alpha slept well. Somewhere here in my own bed, I learned how to sleep and ache at the same time. When morning came, she stood at the bedroom doorway. Hair loose, eyes dark with not sleep. She said, "We should talk." I nodded. We sat at the table like diplomats who forgot their countries. She whispered, "I'm sorry," and for a heartbeat I saw the woman I fell in love with standing inside the one who hurt me. The kettle clicked off, the apartment exhaled. My phone lit up with a calendar reminder for a life that no longer fit. I reached to silence it and froze, because her phone vibrated again on the counter behind her. It was his name. The preview said, "Be bold today, own it." The message pulsed there, bright in morning light. She hadn't seen it yet. I watched the words linger, as if testing whether they could walk all the way across the room and sit between us again. Then the screen dimmed, and the apartment was quiet enough that I could hear the cooling metal tick inside the kettle. I didn't say anything. She didn't turn around. The moment hovered, fragile, waiting to become the one that would decide the next 100. And then the screen lit again. After she packed a small overnight bag to clear her head, the apartment finally learned how to be silent without her in it. Silence isn't absence, it's pressure. The kind that sits in your chest and makes you measure your breaths against the refrigerator's hum. For 2 days, I fell asleep on the couch with the TV talking to itself at low volume, the blue light washing the room like false dawn. Every surface felt like a photograph taken 1 second before a memory. I didn't touch her mug. I washed her plate and turned it face down to dry as if it could drown and be reborn. The insomnia came with questions that had no interest in answers. When did it start? Where were we? What did I miss? Memory, weaponized, makes a film out of your life and edits you out of the best parts. I replayed mornings where her hair still smelled like rain and someone else. I replayed the laugh she took to other rooms. I counted how many times I let something slide because love likes to be generous, even with the knives. On the 3rd night, I went walking in the rain. It wasn't a choice. The walls were turning in. The streets had that clean, rinsed look, neon reflected in puddles that trembled at every car's passing. I found myself outside the gym she joined last spring, the one with the frosted glass and the slogan about power stenciled in black. Through the window, a trainer corrected someone's posture. 2 men joked near the free weights, laughing like they'd never said the wrong thing in their lives. I tried to picture him, the one who called himself the alpha. The word tasted like pennies. I expected fury. I wanted a good, honest rage to carry me. Instead, what came was smaller and meaner: curiosity. Who uses that word about himself and means it? Who texts another man's wife in the morning with a command to own it? He felt like a caricature printed in bold lines, but the damage he made was not cartoonish. People can be ridiculous and ruinous at once. The rain thickened. I turned my face up to it, let it flatten my hair. Somewhere inside me, a steel thread pulled tight. This would not be the city where I curled inward and stayed. Back home, I did what lonely animals do. I climbed. I put the couch cushions back in a way that would make no sense to anyone but me. I rolled the rug edge to chase crumbs that were too small to matter. I lifted a stack of books and found one of her hair ties, thin and black and still holding the shape of a ponytail that had been undone. I held it like a found photograph. In the bathroom, I replaced the hand soap. It felt like treason. Then it felt like a small kindness. I didn't know for whom. Sleep finally came in short rooms. 20 minutes at a time, doors slamming in dreams. On the 5th morning, she called. I let it ring twice, 3 times, answered on 4. Her voice sounded careful. She said she was staying with her sister. I heard a kettle in the background. She asked if I was eating. I said yes. It was a small lie. Grief suppresses the hunger you need and inflates the hunger you can't feed. She asked if we could talk that evening. I told her I needed more time. She said she understood, and for a second she did. Then I heard a voice in the background. A man. She said, "I have to go." The line went soft. The silence pressed a thumb into my throat. That afternoon, I found the thread that changes a story. On her laptop, still logged into her cloud by some mercy or mistake, there was a folder named Inspo. Inside, 2 subfolders. 1, recipes we never cooked. 2, screenshots. Captured quotes about power, discipline, winning. The language of men who look in the mirror and congratulate themselves for existing. Across several images, the same face. Square jaw, gym mirror selfies. A line in his bio about alpha energy. Evan. Not a specter now, pixels and posture. He didn't seem like the villain I wanted him to be. He looked like a man who had been told to be something and believed the telling. And yet he had stood on my life and called it. The messages were worse when they weren't vulgar. You're wasting your prime with someone who doesn't lead. I want to teach you what you deserve. Ownership is love. He liked imperatives. He liked the sound of his own short sentences. I recognized the psychology. They sell it in bright packaging and call it certainty. Certainty is a drug. It works until it doesn't. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet. Somewhere outside, a bus sighed. Somewhere inside, a last hinge popped. The turning point wasn't loud either. It was a Sunday morning when the light didn't feel accusatory anymore. The city smelled clean. I made coffee black and didn't pour a second cup. I took her mug down anyway, then put it back. I printed the 6 worst messages and slid them into an envelope, not to throw at her, but to hold in my hand when I needed to remember what I was letting go of. I wrote a letter, not to her, to myself. 1 page, 3 sentences. You are not less because someone else is loud. You are not small because someone else flexes. Walk your rooms and call them yours. I read it once, then again. The words didn't fix anything. They put a floor under my feet. By afternoon, I had booked a session with a therapist a colleague recommended. The appointment confirmation felt like a receipt for a future where I didn't drown. I texted her. We need to divide the week for the apartment for now. I'll be out Monday through Thursday. You can have it then. She replied with a sequence of dots and then okay. No arguments, no pleas. The ellipses were the truest thing we had left, unsaid, unresolved, honest in their incompletion. That night I did something petty and precise. I emptied the liquor cabinet of the bottle he'd suggested in a message she'd saved, some rare rye he called Alpha Fuel. I poured it down the sink, watched the amber arc, smelled the sweetness, turned the tap until it was gone. It wasn't revenge, it was a redirection. The only fuel in my apartment would be mine. The hiss of the faucet softened. The rain began again, somewhere between mist and memory. I stood at the window and let the city's lights make small constellations on the glass. I did not make a wish, I made a promise. When I eventually slept, I dreamed of the empty chair at our dinner table pulling itself back under the table, as if tired of standing apart. In the morning, the room felt slightly larger. I put on a clean shirt, shaved, and opened the door to go to my first session. The hallway smelled like someone else's toast and a hint of detergent. Ordinary life moved on in its soft shoes. I took a breath, stepped out, and locked the door behind me. The key clicked, a small, honest sound. And that's when the elevator dinged and opened, and she stepped out with a paper bag in her hands and rain in her hair. She smiled like she was trying it on. The bag crinkled. She said, "Can we talk?" I looked at the clock on my phone and then at her. The apartment door behind me was still warm from my hand. The hallway light hummed. I thought of the envelope with his messages tucked inside a drawer. I thought of my letter. I didn't move. The elevator doors began to close behind her, then bounced open again. She held the bag up as if it were proof of something. "I brought breakfast," she said, and the words sounded like yesterday trying to get in through the front. We ate in the kitchen because the table had a memory. She unpacked the bag slowly, the way someone diffuses a device they built themselves. 2 croissants, a small jar of jam, butter that had already softened. She placed things carefully, creating a scene where care could be seen. The light was kind that morning, the kind that forgives skin and shows dust. We sat, we cut, we chewed. We didn't look up at the same time. "I ended it," she said to her plate. "Last night." I didn't answer right away. She added, "I told him I couldn't do this to you anymore." The phrasing was strange, "to you." As if this were not also something done to herself. She tucked hair behind her ear, a gesture that used to be mine to watch. "I'm sorry," she said again, and this time something broke beneath the words. Not theater, not for absolution. A small bone of denial finally snapping. "Why him?" came out of me without strategy. She exhaled. He was simple, clear. He said things with certainty. He made me feel decisive, even when I wasn't. She looked up then, and the guilt in her eyes had the dull shine of a coin rubbed thin. "With you I think, I feel, I hesitate. I wanted to feel strong." Her mouth trembled. It wasn't strength. The admission landed like rain on warm pavement, steam then. "Did he love you?" I asked. She flinched. "He loved being the one." She sipped water like she didn't trust it. "He said he was an alpha. He said I needed that. He said you were." She stopped. The rest of the sentence has 1,000 endings. None of them matter now. The word alpha had become ridiculous and dangerous, a child's crown with nails on the. "I'm not fighting him," I said. "I won't enter that contest." She nodded, quick and grateful. "I know." She touched the table's edge. "I'm here because I want to reconcile." The word felt clinical, paperwork and processes. I waited. She kept going softer. "Not just fix a thing, build a new one." She looked at the window where the rain was drawing faint lines. "If you want that." "What do you want of me?" I asked. "Boundaries," she said. "Questions, honesty, time." The list was right and also weighty. "And what do you offer?" I asked. She swallowed. "Transparency, counseling." "No more shadows." She folded her hands, clenched them, released. "I will answer. I will stay in the room when it hurts." The The promises weren't fireworks. They were nails, and I could see her trying to hold them without bleeding. I told her I'd started therapy. Relief flickered across her face, then shame. Good, she whispered. I will too. We sat there with our parallel intentions, like two architects sketching over old blueprints with trembling pencils. I felt the urge to ask for every detail. The mind wants a map of the battlefield where it was ambushed, but maps can become prisons. I need to know enough to understand the shape, I said. Not the color of the walls, she nodded, tears standing and not falling. We talked for an hour that felt like a day. She told me the first dinner that wasn't a dinner, the first message that felt bigger than a joke. The first lie she told herself so she could tell me a smaller one. She told me about the high of certainty, how it dissolves when you hold it up to the light, how it returns like a cheap perfume even when you wash your hands. She said leaving him felt like stepping out of a bright room that burned her and into a gray one that might be kinder. There are apologies that ask to be forgiven and apologies that offer you a place to set your pain down. Hers felt like the second one for a moment, and then the moment ended because pain is heavy and keeps rolling. I asked her if she'd told him about us trying. She shook her head. I blocked him. The simplicity of that sounded like a slogan. Blocks don't undo journeys, they just shut gates. We drew boundaries in real ink. A no-contact note she wrote and sent while I stood at the window, not to police her, but so we both could hear the click of a door closing. Shared passwords for now. A schedule for the apartment that gave us space to not perform stability. A counseling appointment booked where both our names would sit next to the word intake. The small admin of grief. It felt merciful to have. What about love? She asked at the end, voice thin from being brave. Do you still? The question pulled the floor again. Love isn't an on-off switch. It's a house where the lights work in some rooms and won't turn on in others, even when you flip the switch gently. Yes, I said, and also not like before. Her eyes closed for a second, and when they opened, the room had changed temperature. We stood, plates untouched now, croissants flaked into a constellation on the table. She reached out, stopped, let her hand fall. I'll go, she said. Give you the afternoon. I nodded. She walked to the door, turned the handle, paused. If you think of a question later, she said, ask it. Don't let it poison you. The phrasing sounded like something her therapist hadn't said yet, but it was good. She left. The door closed softly. The apartment listened. I walked to the drawer and took out the envelope with his messages. I didn't open it. I held it, heavier than paper, lighter than a stone. I carried it to the balcony. The jasmine was still holding small white stars in the damp air. I slid the pages out and read only the first lines. It was enough to remember the tone. Then slowly, I fed them to the blue flame of the lighter we kept for candles we never lit. The paper curled into itself, turned black, turned to air. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like ending a conversation I should never have had to host. My phone buzzed on the table. A new email. Subject line, membership renewal notice. His gym, her gym. The algorithm hadn't caught up to my life. I deleted it. Outside, the rain took a breath and stopped. The city cleared its throat. The floor beneath my feet stayed steady. For the first time in weeks, I made the bed and didn't imagine a ghost beside me. I lay down on top of the covers and looked at the ceiling, where morning light had shifted to something warmer. The quiet didn't feel like pressure. It felt like space. And then, softly, someone knocked. Once. Twice. The knock belonged to the morning after a long night, hesitant and human. I opened the door to find a small package on the mat. No one in the hallway. I brought it inside, sat on the sofa, and unwrapped the brown paper to find a book I'd loaned to a friend months ago, poems about forgiveness and fences and the wild places between them. No note, the timing was either cosmic or ordinary. Maybe those are the same. I placed the book on the coffee table and let it sit there like a suggestion. When she came by in the afternoon, our schedule said she could collect a few things. I'd already made the rooms gentler. Not for her, for me. I opened a window, let the city's breath come through and comb the stale air. The jasmine scent drifted in, softer now, less insistent. The coffee machine hissed once to announce itself and then quieted. I watched the dust in the sunlight, the way it danced in columns and waited for nothing. You learn, after a while, to let light be light without asking it to heal. She stood in the doorway with a canvas tote and a careful smile that didn't expect anything. We moved around each other like people in a small kitchen at a party, avoiding collisions we used to welcome. She picked up a sweater, a book, a favorite mug with a crack only she loved. Each object seemed to check her pulse. Do you want me to leave the plant? She asked, hand resting on the small ficus that had learned our seasons without complaint. Take it, I said. Rooms learn to breathe again. She nodded like I'd said something wise. It didn't feel like wisdom. It felt like being tired in an honest way. We didn't relitigate. We didn't tally. We didn't call him names. We honored, accidentally, the strange dignity that sometimes follows wreckage. The kind that doesn't perform goodness but also refuses to perform pain. At the sink, she set the mug down, looked at me with eyes I knew in every weather. "I don't want to hurt you anymore," she said. "That's not a request," I answered, softer than it reads. "It's a line," she nodded. "I understand." Somewhere in the building, a child laughed. Somewhere outside, a bus sighed the same tired sigh as last. Forgiveness arrived not as a single grand act, but as a series of small permissions. Permission to let a shadow be a shadow without interrogating it. Permission to eat dinner at the table and let the chair across stay empty without making it a sermon. Permission to walk past her side of the closet and not narrate the absence. Forgiveness is not a gift you hand to the person who hurt you. It's a key you use to walk out of a room you've outgrown. I didn't say any of this. I made tea. I handed her a cup. We stood in our apartment with our small, warm hands around something harmless. She asked if someday we could sit and talk without the outline of this between us. "Someday," I said. "The word is a bridge that doesn't promise where it lands." She nodded. We shared a quiet smile that didn't pretend to be a beginning. We let it be what it was, a goodbye shaped like a thank you. She lifted the tote. I walked her to the door. The hallway light buzzed its soft electric hymn. "Take care," she whispered. "You too," I answered, and felt the truth ring through the words like a tuning. After the door closed, the apartment seemed to inhale. I walked from room to room and touched the edges of things, not to anchor myself, but to introduce myself to my life again. The morning had folded into a low, honey light that made even the scuffs on the floorboards look intentional. I opened the balcony door. The city lay out there, messy and endless and forgiving in the way cities are. Not because they care, but because they don't. Rain had washed the air clean. The jasmine had lost a few blossoms and still smelled like something worth keeping. On the table, the poem book waited. I opened it at random. A line about fences being for defining, not dividing. About boundaries as invitations to be exact about who you are. About love as an action that doesn't always look like staying. The page didn't save me. It offered company. Sometimes that's better. I closed the book and felt my chest ease in a way that wasn't dramatic or cinematic. I just felt like breathing was the same size as my body again. I picked up the empty frame we always meant to fill with a photo from a lake we never visited. I set it on the shelf anyway, frame without picture, a placeholder honest about being a placeholder. There is a future here, I thought, and I don't need to know its angle today. The light moved across the floor. I sat in it, legs crossed, palms open on my knees like I'd seen in a class once. The quiet belonged to me. The morning belonged to me. Even the memory of the man who liked the sound of the word alpha belonged to me now, but in a different way. As a finished chapter, dog-eared and put back on a high shelf you don't reach for anymore. In the kitchen, the kettle clicked off, that small pewter heartbeat. I poured hot water over a bag of tea and watched the curl of steam rise and disappear into nothing useful and everything necessary. On the counter, my phone buzzed with a message from a friend. "Come by for dinner, no pressure." I typed, "Yes." The send sound was soft and immediate. I lifted the cup, stood by the window, and let the city's hum fold into the room like music you don't have to dance to. Outside, the last drops on the railing gave up their grip and fell. Inside, I set the cup down and let the silence finish its sentence. And when the morning light finally thinned into afternoon, I walked to the door, picked up my keys, and left, not to chase, not to flee, but to meet a day that was as simple as it sounded. The hallway stretched ahead, ordinary and kind. The elevator dinged, a soft agreement. I stepped in. I did not look back. Dinged, a soft agreement. I stepped in. I did not look back.